So I just did a podcast of what's happening in my life and my real world about bringing racial equity from the intellectual, talking about it, learning about it, book study focus, to taking on a consulting position in a very diverse Southern community, where I will be on the ground for 6 weeks and working hybrid for 6 weeks to see what their appetite is for a culture change. Um, and I feel such trepidation about that I reminds me of when I met my husband's two biracial daughters who are adults. And as magnanimous and as woke as I think I was or wanted to be, I had never spent the night in the home of a Black family. I had never been around the culture enough to experience any of it. Wasn't part of my white bubble, and I didn't know I was missing anything. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Hi, everybody. Kim Brasser, One Voice Evolving podcast. And today I get to be my own guest. So I'm going to put on my interview hat and no, I'm not. What I'm going to do is just talk to you from the heart about what it's like to live in this body doing this work in the real world. You know, we spend a lot of time in racial equity learning, reading books, doing book studies, finding out how to respond and how to be seen as safe and how people perceive us and all the ways our privilege gives us advantage or a leg up that we didn't deserve. While DEI takes a hit for putting the most educated population in positions of management, which are Black women. Season one has been amazing. We had 25 episodes. We are now, I think this is about episode 5 into season 2. And I had a cancellation this week and I couldn't quickly refill it. And so raw, real, and relatable, and probably some profanity along the way. From my heart to yours, here's what's happening. I have been a organizational change management and have a background and a career in um, corporate human resources, executive coaching for highly functioning addicts and alcoholics, and change agent for companies that have maybe been acquired. There's been a huge morale dip, their production's down, their trust quotient is low, and the managers don't know what to do about it, or the new owners don't know what to do about it, or every checkbox list they've tried isn't landing with the people. Because here's a fun fact: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you're coming in with a DEI proposal or a lean management proposal or a check the box communication training, when the emphasis is on check the box, not do the work, then you get bodies in seats, but you don't get first order change that changes the culture, the water everybody's swimming in. So in this year, I started One Voice Evolving podcast around my particular passion project that I happened into over a year ago under the tutelage of Dr. Nikki Lanier. And I have gone from my first of what has racism cost me to making a legacy plan that I have committed 5 years of my life to, and we're now 15 months into that, to see if I could help move the needle in our culture in the United States beyond checking the box and into actually embracing the inevitable browning of America and our workforce. As all these boomers retire or die off, what you're left with is a multicultural workforce and not the cultural underpinnings of talking to people instead of about them and assuming good intent that's required for any organization to build trust. And so my podcast manager, Joseph, said, just talk about what's on your heart. Well, here's what's on my heart. About a week before Christmas, someone reached out to me who I worked with 6 years ago before I early retired. And we had done some exceptional work in the Northwest that brought a low morale manufacturing plant to a high morale best places to work in our particular city. And it was a model that worked, and it was sustainable, and they went on to hold that significance of that title for several years after I left. Well, now we're 6 years later, and the same big company that acquired the one in the Northwest that I happen to be working at as an HR business partner has now acquired another company about 5 years ago. And they have not successfully made the cultural transition from we, they, the acquired company versus the parent company, into we together swimming in the same water. Here's your identity, here's corporate identity, and here's the place we overlap in the middle. And it's the overlap in the middle where people find their power struggles. The unwritten rules, that's what I do. I've done it forever. And I've done it in organizations, I've done it in churches, I've done it in executive coaching, I've done it in small groups. And I've done it as a consultant since I retired, in and out of the country, both. In every case, my position at the table has always been a minority voice, as maybe the only female in the C-suite, or the only female in upper management, or the only female voice at the decision-making table. And I have fought and strongly held that position against great odds sometimes. When I get called in, it's not uncommon for there to be some big shakeup that they want to do, because the managers, the CEOs, the owners, the presidents, have decided that the problem is the people. And I am the minority voice that says the problem is never the people. The problem is either a systems issue, that your systems are broken and not serving the people, including your customer base or your employee base, or it is the communications. What your vision is not making it to the end of the row. So something's happening in between. And with enough experience, you begin to learn that every organization has some similarities. And one of the similarities is that when an initiative stalls or gets derailed in the first 2 years, when you get pockets of resistance that won't be moved, it's usually a mid-management problem. You don't have the right people on the bus in the right seats. And the ones you think are the right people because they look like you or think like you or have backgrounds like you are not necessarily the ones who are going to embrace and engage the minority voices of people in their pecking order. Now, minority voices can be people of color. It can be anything but straight white males. It can be people in different departments. It can be people in different earning groups or pay grades. If I'm in a bigger pay grade, then I think I'm better than you. And that people don't respond to authoritarian structure. You can influence as a leader. It is influence and vision that makes you a leader. It is micromanagement that makes people leave the job they love so much. People don't quit jobs, they quit managers. So there's a holistic approach to that I always take. And every time I go in, I am the expert. But it has always been my intent and my experience to create a safe place where people's voices can be heard, every every voice in equal order, every voice matters, and every voice participates. That's a lot to ask from corporate America sometimes, but we always manage to gain and earn enough trust that people begin to learn how to say what they mean and mean what they say and be accountable and be consistent. And people being not just the people who are customer facing, but the ones in the back who are making your life better or worse. And not just the people who are in the stock exchange, but the ones who are on food stamps. Every single layer of customer service, every single motivation fuels or fans the flames of a cultural fire. I know all these things. I've done all these things. So what does that have to do with racial equity? My experience of growing up was mostly white. There was one Black family in the school I went to, the elementary school. There might have been two or three by the time I hit high school. Not many. Not a lot of exposure. Went to work for the police department at Las Vegas, got more exposure. But I was just a secretary. I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a reason to be. I was busy making babies and starting a life. I moved from there to the inland Northwest, where I saw my first honest to God exposure to white supremacists in the Aryan nations of northern Idaho versus Black athletes at Gonzaga University. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked to see that there had been some overt racial tension at the Gonzaga campus back then. And that was 20 something years ago. But still, I was a late in life student. I didn't go back to college and I didn't begin a formal education until after I had put two husbands and three kids, got them on their path to their education. Before I said, I think I'm going to do this for myself. And at 45, I went back to school. And my minority voice was being a female in Christian education, because turns out there are things you can't do as a woman at Moody Bible Institute schools or in Presbyterian cohorts or in Jesuit Catholic colleges. So I have always thought that I identified with the minority voice because of my body size, which was obese most of my life, and the biases and the restrictions to movement and to mobility in business that come because of that. And because I was a woman and it's a man's world. And I did all the things that the 80s taught you to do to suit up and show up. Never let them see you sweat, never let them see you cry, work twice as hard, don't let the kids interfere, all the things that I would not do today, but that I did then. My husband is getting ready to retire for real, and he was a little concerned about finances. And at the same time as he was voicing those concerns to me, I got this phone call from a previous supervisor who knows about the work I do, who knows the difference we made in the inland Northwest, and who wants me to come to this facility in the South and do it again. Do it again, do it there as a consultant, not as an employee, which is far more challenging because it's different to be one of the crew versus somebody on the outside. But I've had enough experience from the inside with consultants to know that I don't like what consultants do. I don't like the way they come in and they dissect all the data and they pick it apart and they tell you what to do and what you need to do. And for the low price of another X million dollars, they will even come and coach you how to do it. But guess what they don't do? They don't invest themselves, their hearts, their life, their blood into your results. They say, oh, well, if you didn't get it, it must be because you weren't doing it right. And we can send in another team for another few thousand, tens of thousands of dollars. It's not accessible. It's not sustainable. And it's not in alignment with my value system and who I am. So I said yes. And it moved really quickly. Paperwork to give me access to the data I needed so that I can go on site and take the temperature, do a communications audit, and see what's really happening on the ground. Because remote work is wonderful and hybrid work is my preferred method. But I have learned from doing this for so many years that there has to be the know, like, trust factor. I have to be on the ground with the people day to day long enough to win their trust enough, not forever, enough to take the next step of the process that's going to move their collective needle forward. And I tell people, any organization will chew you up and spit you out if you let it. And so much of this that I do is helping people understand their belief systems that cause them to work where they work and accept what they accept and acquiesce to what they acquiesce to, and how to find their voice and how to speak in a way so people will listen, and listen in a way so that people will speak, that engenders community and trust and enjoyment. We spend more time at work than we do anywhere else in our life. I don't get as much time with my family as I do when I'm working an eight to five. And what happens at home doesn't stay at home. It follows me into work. So if I'm getting a bad time at home, I'm not having a great time at work. Same thing goes when I go home. I have a bad day at work. Dinner is not that much fun at home. So learning how to separate those two things, learning how to make sense of it in your mind, all of those things are foundational. I call it communications 101. So what does all of that have to do with racial equity? This is the first time that I have been called into a demographically diverse area of the country, a demographically diverse facility, and I have a new awareness and understanding of the privilege that I carry and the presumptions that people make when they see both my age, my white hair, and my white skin. After the social media and the learning I've done this year with the One Voice Evolving podcast, I will never enter a conference room again with the confidence and assurance that everybody is going to see that I'm a safe person. I will never approach as though I understand before they have fully explained to me what their issue is. I will never presume or center myself the way I have in the past, or be a victim. I'm bringing a different me to the table, and this me is untested. It's untested in this environment that I know like the back of my hand. I hope I don't make mistakes, but I'm sure I will. I hope that I am as egalitarian and as inclusive as I have been learning that I wasn't. But when we're triggered, sometimes we revert. And if I revert, then I have to be willing and able to be called in, called out, and accountable, just like everybody else. My leadership style is always leading by example. And this magical moment that the universe has given me this feels like a test. It's like, okay, we brought you into this over a year ago. You've done all the homework. We've come as far as we can go without you actually interacting in the real world, real life, real time with real people around these issues. Let's see what you've learned. I hate it. I do. I hate it. And I'm excited for it. And I'm hopeful that I will pass this test in my own eyes. And everything that I teach and have taught for 15 years now, I will apply to myself first, before, and as we are doing the homework in these weekly groups with these small group cohorts of employees. I will share honestly and authentically to encourage them to share honestly and authentically. I will give everybody the tools to keep themselves safe, knowing that nobody else is going to do that for you. This is an inside job. This is your dialogue. This is your risk to do. And I feel some trepidation, much like I did when I met my husband's biracial adult children. We married just little over 2 years ago. And I have always talked a good game about not being prejudiced. But when you don't have to interact with people of other nationalities or denominations, or when you live in a white bubble, that's my favorite phrase, my little white bubble, where I can choose. If I don't like it, if it gets uncomfortable, I don't have to engage, I can leave. And I often have. And now I am purposefully and intentionally going into a situation that I expect is going to make me uncomfortable, and I embrace that. So what changed for me in this year? That, whether you call it white privilege or white fragility or anti-racism, which are inflammatory language, or whether you call it racial equity, inclusivity, and respectful communications, respect for people, it gives me a way to move the needle forward. And so when the universe says, will you? My answer is yes. I will. I will show up, and I will bring all of who I am to the table, and I will lead by example how to bring all of who you are at the table. And we will create together a safe place for every voice. That's the plan. That's the intent. That's the program. The result of that is that people begin to build trust one with another. All of a sudden, work becomes the place that they don't dread on Monday morning, because it's never the work they dread. It's always the interactions with the people. It's the junior high school stuff. It's the bullies in the bathroom that you're still dealing with when you're 50 years old. So those are the things that we're going to put to rest, and let people shine, let them work in their skill set, let me work in my skill set. And when people come together like that, magic happens. And I will watch for the magic. It's possible. So at this point, my favorite outlets are Blue Sky for Twitter kind of feeds, Substack for intellectual, political, and newsworthy conversations, TikTok, because the communities that have been built there are going to be sorely missed if it goes away. But it is how I found Dr. Nikki Lanier. It is how I found other Black creators whom I have interviewed and whom I follow and who I support and who support me. My exposure, so limited. My curiosity so large. My heart so invested. in a world where racism cannot live. I hope you'll join me. Like, share, follow, support. Let the world know you're in the fight for real.